So I just set out on my own to find the truths. Started with reading every book I could get my hand on. 3 years into that book search, my brother Paul, who my latest book Forever is dedicated to, he found in his closet in San Diego a book called The Dead Have Never Died by the lawyer Edward C. Randall, copyright 1917. And he found it and he called me up and he said, I found this book you might be interested in. I said, read me the title. The Dead have, it was so faded, he was trying to read it. The dead have never died, it says, by Edward C. Randall. Send it. When the book arrived, when I read, it was about the mediumship of Emily French, the subject of my first book, who is now, after 30 plus years, one of the great heroes of my life. That book changed the course of everything. When I discovered the fact of life of the independent voice, which to me is the crown jewel of mediumship.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to Soul Explorers. We're your host, Sally Taylor. My name is Gary Langley, and today we have Riley Heagerty with us. Riley is an archivist, researcher, and he's written soon-to-be 11 books will be published. Riley, welcome to the show.
Greetings. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
We're really pleased to have you with us today and to hear a little bit about your story and your background that brought you to the work that you're currently doing. Could you give us kind of the Reader's Digest condensed version of how you became the researcher that you are and have produced these books?
After college at Oswego State University up here where I live in Oswego, right on Lake Ontario, 60 miles across the lake is Canada, but we live right on the lake. I pursued a career in music and went to Philadelphia and signed on to an agency and was a professional musician for 20 to 25 years. 3 years in to leaving my town here and going to Philadelphia, 3 years in, when the group I was in was starting to really make some progress, my younger brother, Dean, walked out my parents' front door on November the 19th, 1976, and was never seen or heard from again. That was the beginning of my career. I carried that weight on my shoulders my entire musical career. He has never been found since. Still, at the end of my musical career, so-called, at the peak, let's just say at the peak of my career, the young lady I lived with, Diane Rossell, was struck down by leukemia. Off she went to Johns Hopkins Hospital, and she passed away. She had extraordinary clairvoyance before she did, and that set me on my path to explore life after death. But I had two tragedies, one in the beginning of my musical career and one at the end. After she passed away, that was enough in my mind. That was enough for me to take. I have to go out and search this out. It was so profound when she passed away that I said I am dedicating my life to finding out my own personal answers to life after death, and if spirits can communicate back to us. I had two powerful, life-altering experiences to start me on my trail, because the one compounded the first one of the brother going missing, my younger brother. That was enough. But then after she passed away, and she saw in her bedchamber at Johns Hopkins Hospital, she saw her son, who came to her nightly before she passed away. And she told me these facts, and it was astonishing. And there's no doubt whatsoever that her son was in that room. He passed away when he was 2, 15 years prior. And she said, "You're not going to tell me, his mother, I'm not seeing my son right now. Don't even try it," she said. "He's here in this room." And he brought other spirits with him. And I was stunned by it. And she goes, "I'm not going to make it through this dreadful disease either. I thought I'd give you a heads up." So it was really a powerful, life-altering moment. So there, there we go to the cemetery for her funeral and all that business. And I walked away and I said, do I have any answers at all for life after death? Anything? The answer was no. I was brought up in private Christian academies, Catholic academies. Of course, they didn't supply anything. So I just set out on my own to find the truths. Started with reading every book I could get my hand on. 3 years into that book search, my brother Paul, who my latest book Forever is dedicated to, he found in his closet in San Diego a book called The Dead Have Never Died by the lawyer Edward C. Randall. Copyright 1917. And he found it and he called me up and he said, "I found this book you might be interested in." I said, read me the title. The Dead have, it was so faded, he was trying to read it. The dead have never died, it says, by Edward C. Randall. Send it. When the book arrived and I read, it was about the mediumship of Emily French, the subject of my first book, who is now, after 30 plus years, one of the great heroes of my life. That book changed the course of everything. When I discovered the fact of life of the independent voice, which to me is the crown jewel of mediumship, even beyond materialization, as far as longevity of seances and the power necessary to facilitate. The independent voice is the crown jewel, where you can sit and have a full form conversation with the very spirit talking in their own voice, apart from the medium. And the more I investigated it, the more I became convinced. And I thought to myself, my God, how come the world doesn't know this? They knew it. Edward Randall was a very famous trial lawyer in Buffalo, and he approached it as an agnostic. His attitude was, all there is in the universe is matter and force. There is no spirit. And boy, his day of reckoning came when he met Emily French. He completely transformed from what he witnessed to a champion of spiritual truth. And those things resonated with me. I thought, this is what I've been looking for. So that started me off on my search to keep searching. So I found out that Randall had published 5 books, all which were out of print, and some are still available as reprints. But so I just devoured all of his work, and I found her great-great-grandsons who supplied me with photographs of Emily. And I did lectures, and I went to England twice to lecture. But of course, they never heard of her. They never heard of several of the spirits that I wrote about. The Bang sisters, they'd never heard about. They were blown out of the water by the Bang sisters, Emily French. And I just wanted to go to England anyways. The Beatles were from there. They really, that was my inspiration to play music, was the Beatles. So I kept going and going. And after I published my first book, The French Revelation, which took about almost 10 years to complete, because I had found other work that Edward Randall had written about Emily French. I found some in Australia, some in Buffalo Archives Library at the University of Michigan. I found all kinds of things that he never had published. So that was my journey. That's how it started, was finding all of his work and putting it all together in one discernible piece, The French Revelation. Then from there, I just kept going with searching out all the great mediums and I might as well have a double PhD in the subject of historic spiritualism, because it's absolutely mind-boggling story of what I call the century of wonders between 1848. Now, this is modern spiritualism, has nothing to do with indigenous, which goes back thousands of years. But modern spiritualism, starting with the Fox sisters manifestations in Hydesville, which is only an hour from my house, 1848 to around 1955, 1960 is when the great mediums flourished. There was mediums in almost every home. And this is something I've always said, unless you study this subject, like I have, you will assuredly see the pattern that the spirit guides took. They knew full well that they had a century, they had a window of opportunity for about a century. And then materialism was going to step in, massive greed, distractions, internet, social media. They knew it all. They knew all of it was coming. They already knew. So back then, in the heyday of spiritualism, that century, there was sacred spiritual, the spiritual event of the week was the family sitting to develop the mediums. And it was a very spiritual thing. It's like people now, go out to dinner on a Friday night. That wasn't the case for thousands of families. They would have their seances. That would be the sacred moment of the week. And then it was a very holy event. And then luckily, some of them documented what they witnessed. Then, of course, some of the great scientific minds of the world approached the subject as skeptics. And they took it upon themselves, like Alfred Russel Wallace, the co-discoverer of evolution, Sir William Crookes, Sir William Barrett, Sir Oliver Lodge, Arthur Conan Doyle, and a host of others approached the subject as skeptics. One can only deny if someone like Alfred Russel Wallace, please tell me how you can possibly criticize the findings of the man who co-discovered evolution, his eyewitness account of what he witnessed himself. Where are you, Mr. Critic, on that one? Disprove that. Of course, no one can. No one. And these heavyweights added to the great truth of spiritualism. Even though the word spiritualism puts a lot of people off, it still does. It still has, it has its, I don't know, prejudice lurks everywhere. But that's what kept me going.
Let me ask you a question, if it's okay, Riley.
Of
Not
course.
everybody who will watch this video will know what we mean by independent direct voice medium. Could you describe in a little more detail what that is and how it manifests?
I'll use Emily French as an example. Her and Mr. Randall would go into his room, which he constructed at the top story of his house on Ferry Street in Buffalo, New York. He called it the Tower Room. He would have a small little table. Emily French would sit across from him. He'd sit across from her, just those two. And after the initial, when he started making extreme progress with her mediumship, he had stenographers and secretaries, like at least one secretary in the room in total complete dark, taking down verbatim everything that was said. So an independent voice manifesting apart from the medium, out of thin air. The spirit themselves is talking in their own voice. Sometimes it could be 2 feet over the medium's head, or it could be up to the ceiling. And Randall, to be sure, in the beginning, held Mrs. French held her hands and had his feet on top of her feet. And he had her put her mouth gently on his wrist. So there's no possible way she could possibly, at 65 years old, which was, life expectancy during that time was 40, 42 or 43. She was 60 something, which was ancient. No way on earth could this woman be using ventriloquism? It's absurd to even think of it. So he did all these trials and tests. The voices manifested out of the thin air. So essentially, it's like Leslie Flint, the British medium, the voices manifest out of the thin air, apart from the medium. The medium has nothing to do with it. They're just supplying the psychic force. It is the crown jewel of mediumship.
And then just for terminology's sake, many people hear direct voice or independent voice. There's a difference between the two. And direct voice is usually using a trumpet. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Direct voice is the cousin of independent voice. It's a funny little thing because it's difficult to explain to people, but direct voice is essentially independent voice that's with aids, like the trumpet, which is a light aluminum megaphone that the spirits utilize to amplify the voices, or even use the trumpet as a little cabinet to condense the energy. These are all relative terms, but we would never understand it if the spirit chemists tried to explain it to us, because they would say we have no terms to possibly make you understand what we're doing. But direct voice is essentially independent voice with a trumpet. Etta Wright was a direct voice medium. And in her case, there was etherealizations too. It'd be looking, you'd see spirits manifest in her seances, but they're translucent, you could see right through them. But they would be there in the room, you could see, it'd be like looking at a negative of a photograph. But because she used the trumpet and the spirits utilized it exclusively, in her energy field, they had to utilize the trumpet. And that's just the way it is with her, inscrutable to our understanding, but they had to utilize that for her and several other mediums. But in the case of independent voice, there's no trumpet needed.
And with independent voice, has it always, at least in the past, been still utilizing, for example, an ectoplasmic voice box, or is that not even necessary?
The ectoplasmic voice box, to me, that was not a suitable explanation, because it just sounded, even when I first heard it, it's like, what, a box? What do you mean, a voice box? What I've learned is that a spirit is brought into the energy field of the medium and the sitters, because the spirits are in a higher frequency. The earth vibrations are a lower frequency. They bring the spirit into it's almost like a force field around the medium and the sitters, denser than what they have in the higher frequency of the spirit world. The spirit is brought into that field of energy, and it enables, because the energies are a denser quality, it enables them to actually have a larynx again and speaking mechanism. Whereas in the spirit world, you can communicate mentally, but the spirit's brought into the energy field. And it's difficult for many, and it's not difficult for some. No one knows why. But they suddenly are in an energy field where they actually have a larynx again. The density of the energy provides them with their mouth and larynx to be able to speak. So that's what they can, I think that's what they mean by the box, the voice box. To me, it's a field around the medium, which could be considered a box or a closet or whatever you want to call it. They're not the right terms. It's the energy is denser, and they bring the spirit into that field of energy.
And they often draw from the sitters as well as the medium.
Right, that's right.
To create. So when you have a harmonious seance where all the people are in harmony with each other, you have a better seance oftentimes. The energy is clearer, and they're able to bring through people much more easily, I think.
It's a miracle of life to have people, their energy fields all in the same place. That's why back when, in the historic days, they were all the same mindset. Now, who knows who is in the room? You don't know who's recording it on their cell phone or some, everybody wants to be the medium, fame, fortune, 15 minutes of, I don't know. But if you're in harmony, then there it is. The spirits always, they know this. And they must have a hilarious time with watching how humans can just go about their way, when there's inharmony or someone's jealous or someone's, but yes, it's true. Harmony of the sitters is vitally important. If they all recognize that the person is the medium.
Right.
Once they establish that fact and they're not put off or jealous or whatever, and they stand behind the medium, that's the start right there.
Yeah.
And they all show up. To me, I think the standards are much higher now, much, much, much higher because of the way life is, just the distractions and the social media and all of it. I think the standards are way high now. Now the spirits, and they're not lowering their standards for anybody. And the ones who do, they're not who they say they are. They're just out to have a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Riley, I want to ask you, it's been 30 some years you've been doing this research.
Mm-hmm.
How has it changed your life intrinsically? I mean, your daily state of being, how has that transformed as you've learned more and more of this knowledge?
It's almost like enlightenment. Here's an example that this is not boasting, but it is just an example. We went to the Monroe Institute, which is the world famous for consciousness studies in Virginia, established by Robert Monroe. And the last time we went there, we did a gamma reading. It's where they test your brain waves and they test gamma frequencies, which can tell you like consciousness and levels. And I went, and even though there's many distractions in the room, because two of the facilitators were, you had to put headphones on. They put these diodes all over your body, to read your brain chemistry and read the electrical impulses of your brain. Afterwards, I just sat there and sort of meditated. Afterwards, the girl says, she turned around, looked at me, she said, people meditate for 30 or 40 years to reach this level of gamma that you just registered on the computer. She said it's called oneness, and it's called cosmic conscious. That's the highest level. And what she said, I've never seen it. I've never seen anybody have oneness. You know what I said? I said, I don't care. It didn't faze me in the slightest bit. I said, okay, fine, see ya. I walked out. But I can only attribute it to possibly the spiritual freedom and emancipation I've had from these truths, because it has taken away the aspects of physical life that we all have to go through, difficulties every single day, every day. People die, and all over your life you see tragedy and this and that. It's like, how can life be so cruel? But the spiritual truths have saved my mind. They've saved my spirit, and they've saved who I am. I have learned over more than 3 decades, we are truly forever. And this earth life is an eye blink. And it's mostly about overcoming difficulties, believing in yourself, and realizing that there is no guarantee of tomorrow, which John King had said that, and that stuck with me forever. It's like, it's so true. Every day you get up could be it. And I look at it like, I'm surrounded by nature. We live out in the country. And I just look at it like every day is a gift when you wake up. And what you put out, who you are, every thought you have in your mind, every word, and every single action is creating a condition you will inherit at the moment of your passing. There's no savior. There is none of it. All the religious dogma does not exist. I'm sorry, it does not. And this universal law of cause and effect, the reason why it is so relevant is because it applies to everyone. All these different religions and all of the violence and horror and war, because they're arguing over whose belief system is correct and whose isn't, has caused millions of people to die, to be murdered. Our history is rent with awfulness. But the universal law of cause and effect, nature's law, applies to everyone. There is no arguing because nature has the final word, and that's it. So think before you act. Even if it means saying thank you to someone standing in the grocery line, everything coming from you is creating a condition you will inherit at the moment of death, and no one can save you from your actions. That's it. That has kept me going. And I've always thought kindness goes a long ways.
Well, kindness is synonymous with love in the true sense of the word. I mean, most people don't really understand that word, but
No.
it's all encompassing. That love that you're talking about or pointing to, it doesn't negate anything. It extends outward and is an effect in the world. When you're in that state, you're having an effect on the whole.
That's right. And I can't even put words to it. It's astonishing to me how, if like these hate groups and people that are just pass judgment on people who are just being themselves, no one has the right to pass judgment on anybody. And no one has the right to tell someone else, here's how you have to live because of this and this. Where everyone's relationship with nature, to me, which is God, is their own. And that's it. There is no other, any human, no one can say otherwise. It's their personal relationship with the divine spirit. That's it. Mind your own business.
And so essentially, we're our own saviors.
We are your own savior. That's right. You are the architect of your own journey. You are. And there's people that cling to their beliefs. They just cling and cling and cling, especially the really staunch, fanatical religionists. They enter the spirit world and they're still waiting. 2 centuries later, they're still waiting for their savior. The spirit guides, there's no time in the spirit world. So the spirit guides are there saying, we have all the time in the world. You've got to work yourself out of this yourself. There's no one who's going to come and save you. You must believe in yourself and see the wrongs you've done and work yourself out of this yourself, because you're not going anywhere until you do. Only you can do it. Oh, we're waiting for Jesus to come. Well, that's a nice thought, but I'm sorry, it does not exist. It does not exist. So I'm always amazed at how these great spiritual truths, like what I know, what you know, Sally, and all these people that are doing the work. Isn't it astounding that these truths and you look out in the world, and I think to myself, I wish I could just drop off the French Revelation to like Congress, all these politicians, and say, please read this. It may change your outlook on humanity. And I was thinking recently was watching the Olympics. The Olympics is where everyone's together, all over the world. And I was telling Carol, and I said, wouldn't it be nice if all worldly issues could just be solved by a soccer game? You know what I'm saying? Or skating, swimming, pole vaulting. It wouldn't be nice if we could just settle issues and then shake hands and then everybody goes back to their countries. Wouldn't it be nice to settle issues that way instead of war?
So let me ask you one more question then. With all of your research, have you found that people do hold on to their earthly beliefs after they transition. So if they're Christian, when they die, they are looking for a Christian heaven, afterwards. If they're Buddhist, they're looking for Buddha. And or if they think they're going to go to hell, they might experience something hellish for a period of time. What has your research kind of taught you about what people experience as they transition?
Well, it's true. They experience those things. They see like a lot of the near death experience people. They die, they flatline on the operating table. They die. It should be called the death experience, not the near death. They die. A lot of them are DEAD, dead, for a short period of time or a long period of time. Anyways, they usually see a spirit guide. And many of them, we've watched, Carolyn and I watch them all the time, near death stuff, and they think it's Jesus. I'm not saying it's not, but and that other people will see a spirit guide that's relative to their religion. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. As far as the massive belief in a certain dogma, there is a consensus reality which exists in the spirit world. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are still waiting for their savior will gravitate towards the same reality. And like I said earlier, there's no time in the spirit world. And they have to get themselves out of their own situation and realize that they don't need a savior. They're fine just as they are, even with their mistakes. Like a lot of the Christians especially, I want to scream at them. You haven't done anything wrong. You're not guilty of anything. There's nothing to fear. What is it that keeps you so in fear and so worried about hell? Well, like you just said, hell could be a hellish place that they created for themselves. Someone could create a heavenly-ish place for themselves. That's just two adjectives, heaven, hell. There's no definitive heaven. There's no definitive hell. There's just a land of forever that none of us really know how to describe. Even the highest level spirits don't know what it is. They don't know what God is. They don't know what the divine essence really is. They do not know, because it's impossible to describe. How do you describe how nature works? How a butterfly and a chrysalis suddenly transforms and flies off? You can't put any words to it. It's so wondrous but consensus realities exist. If people put themselves in a flaming hell, then that's the literal condition of fire and flames or whatever they created for themselves. There's no literal anything. You know what I'm saying? Did I answer your question or?
You did. And that's essentially what I've come to recognize and be aware of in my journey as well, is that you very much experience kind of what you either expect to experience or what you resonate with when you transition. They're very often new consensus realities. And I sometimes say they're yet another incarnation, because some people do experience a body, some don't, but you can certainly experience things as very physical from my experience of both what I have received from disembodied individuals as well as what I have read that other people have described.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious if you kind of had come across the same sort of thing.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think the whole idea that we're born in sin was one of the greatest frauds perpetrated upon the human race, because
No
you start out in fear. Immediately, you begin life in fear when you're told that. And this is transcending fear, this knowledge. There's nothing to fear. I mean, events are going to happen, and humanly, they may be tumultuous, but ultimately, you're fine, no matter what takes place. So
I agree. It's the whole fanatical Christian dogma has ruined like a massive amount of people in the world. How I still am in shock over these people that I want to just grab them and say, you haven't done anything wrong. There is no such thing as being born into sin. Like you're a shining gem of the universe, like everybody is. There's nothing wrong with you. You know, people make mistakes and the ups and downs of life, but there's nothing in the universe that requires worship. There's nothing that requires adoration. We're going to go and adore. We're going to go to the church and adore Jesus, adore God. We're going to sit and stand up and kneel down, stand up the rosary, pray. You're doing it really for nothing, because you don't need to do that. You're fine just as you are. How about that? Why don't you have faith in yourself? You know, whatever happened there? How come you don't believe in yourself? You've done
And,
nothing
and
wrong.
and the other thing is, there's no judgment.
Nothing.
We are our own judges when we cross to the other side.
No tribunals or God sitting there pounding his gavel down saying you're going to go to hell, you're going to go to heaven. That BS is for 5-year-olds being scared in catechism class.
Right.
Now, there's no basis in reality at all.
No. But you will look at your own life and see where you could grow.
Right.
You know,
it's all about that, though. It's you seeing everything you've ever done, and no one's judging you. No one's doing anything. It's just, now, what are you going to do to unravel what you've done and take it from there? But progress is open to everyone. I don't care how evil they've been. You know, you could have someone like Hitler, God knows where he is, or Stalin, or any of these mass murderers. I don't know where they are, but the statement that sticks with me always has, from Emily French, Her Spirits: the justice, so-called, which meets every soul on the threshold of the afterlife, is terrible in its completeness. I've never heard of anything terrible in its completeness, which means essentially only nature holds the key to that one. And if you read some of my books, there's some traveling to the dark realms, and it's beyond almost comprehension, where people have put themselves from their actions. It's the kind of thing where it takes your breath away when you're reading it, because nature holds the key and no one knows what she has in store, especially for the people who have committed evil acts. My God, you know, she always has the final word. That's it. But I agree with you completely. Have faith in yourself. You know, we're all born as gems. Everyone. Even you, Gary.
So tell us a little bit about the book that you are currently working on to bring to print, hopefully this next year. Can you give us a little bit of information about what that's going to focus on and how soon people can be looking to find it?
With the exception of my first book, The French Revelation, and I think it was my 7th, called The Hereafter, the majority of my books have dealt with the physical phenomena and the manifestations attending the greatest mediums, the eyewitness accounts of mind-staggering things, you know, materialization and, you know, independent voice and just incredible mind-boggling things. The first book, The French Revelation, had to deal with the independent voice, but it was a teaching book filled with teachings, because the lawyer, Edward Randall, had the wherewithal to sit back and ask the spirits, which gravitated towards their circle, all of these questions about everything, all kinds of subjects. And in the hereafter, it was the same kind of thing. There's statements about the afterlife, which I've always been interested in. You know, what happened the moment you died, and what did you see? And that book's filled with that. But this latest book, called Forever, is right back to, it's like a cousin of the French Revelation. It's just specifically teachings that have come from spirits saying, here's this lesson in this subject, here's these teachings. And I have a library of about 500 rare books collected over all these years. So I've been going through them, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a book of, just like the French Revelation, a book of teachings not phenomena, but teachings. And that's what I'm doing. I'm going through, culling from each book the teachings, and that the forever is all that. It's all teachings. And the last chapter is my own personal out-of-body experience at the Monroe Institute, which will knock your head off when you read it, because that the teachings I found out from that, similar to the ayahuasca experience written up in chapter 2 of the Hereafter. Ayahuasca, which of course is the most powerful and revered shamanic admixture in the world. It's called the vine of death. You literally, if it's powerful enough, you pretty much die, and you go off to the spirit world. So it's a teaching book, and I've already started the Forever Volume 2, which will take up where I left off. I've already started writing the introduction already. And then after that, I already have in mind that I'm going to do a book, I think, called The Ghost of Green Mountain, which is the Eddy brothers mediums, the powerful physical mediums. The whole family was mediums, circa 1874, the Eddy brothers. It's absolutely mind-staggering story of these mediums. They're illiterate farmers, but they were born already fully developed physical mediums. No circle development, none of that. Manifestations were attending these mediums in their cradles. Can you imagine that? That's how powerful these people were. It was spirits manifesting by their cradles.
Fantastic. And I love that, because that's really always what I'm looking for. The phenomena is amazing, and it's evidential in its nature as far as it can be, but it's the information that they can bring to us to help us to grow and expand ourselves that, to me, is the most important. It's the juiciest bits, right?
You have the personality that believes it, like Gary does, and several others. You have to have that personality that believes it, because if you don't believe it, then it won't affect your life.
Right. You can lead a horse to water, right? But you can't make him drink.
That's exactly right.
But I have a quick question for you about mediumship and where you think it's going, because it seems, just from my perception, that there are not as many physical mediums now as there were during this heyday era in the US and Europe, potentially around the world. But most of my knowledge is around United States and European mediumship. Why do you think we don't have as many developing physical mediums anymore? I was going to say, if that's an accurate observation, even. I don't know if it is.
It is. Many people have asked the same question. The same natural laws that applied to forever, the same natural laws that applied to the heyday of mediumship, meaning the same laws that allow these manifestations to take place, never change. Natural law changes for no one. Cause and effect is the ruling force of the universe. What you put into the cause, what you put into operation will complete itself one way or another, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. The same laws apply. Humans have changed. This is my theory, and I think based on my own decades of studying this subject, it's a worthwhile concrete theory. Humans have changed. Look at the condition of the world right now. Who would even want to come out of their home circle and be exposed in public? Then social media, the internet, then who knows what happens from there. I wouldn't blame any medium for never coming out of their house. I would have a private family circle. And since natural law doesn't change, I personally believe there are mediums out there who have the wherewithal to not have anything to do with fame, social media, all of it, which has strangled our society. Why should they? Back in the heyday of mediumship, there was none of this. There was no distractions. There was none of it. They had their home circle, period. Now it's hard to find anybody to concentrate when you're talking to them for more than a minute. You know what I'm saying? The distraction level is so high. And it's like, who would you even trust now to have a circle? It's like, who do I know? Who are you? You know, who do you have in your circle? I mean, anymore? How do you even know who they are? The way the ideology and the societal trends are so strange right now and so twisted, and it's a touchy subject. But I personally think, because natural law doesn't change, that there are mediums out there, but they are not coming forward. Because I think myself, if someone was out there, then I think I'm known well enough that they would contact me at least and say, would you please investigate my mediumship? I could put that out there to any medium right now who's even watching this show. Come and sit with me for 5 minutes, and I'll tell you exactly what's going on. You know what I'm saying? If you're legitimate, and this is not a criticism, I will gently tell that person, you know, you're keep going and working on your stuff. But once you accept nothing but positive evidential facts, that settles the question right there. So I think there's legitimate mediums out there, but they're not coming out because of the obviousness of our society right now. Because for every person that believes in you, you're going to be attacked. If you're a materialization medium, would you come out in public? That'd be insanity. Because you have people that are fanatics who think that this is evil. They don't understand the beauty of spirits manifesting. It's a beautiful, gorgeous thing. But like attracts like. You have a bunch of fools sitting around a Ouija board, and one of them happens to be psychic and mediumistic. There are millions of earthbound spirits. I'm not saying because they're earthbound, they're evil. They are not. There are some, definitely, because they died evil, and they cannot progress out of their evil until they do it themselves. But if you have someone in a frivolous situation of sitting and trying to attract spirits, and one of them gets in, then they're in. Then it's a matter of how are we going to get them out of this space now? I think a lot of the current day mediums, I don't think a lot of them are developed enough. I think they left their circle too soon. And they have tended to attract into their space spirits that are frivolous spirits. I'm not saying evil, but I've sat with most of them. I always think the mediums could always develop longer. I'm not saying they're not legitimate, or I'm not saying I'm prejudiced against them at all. I'm saying, in my personal opinion, a lot of these current physical mediums, they should sit a little bit longer for development. That's all.
And one other thing, and Sally and I were discussing this before you came on. It's really important, and I notice it in both mental mediumship and physical mediumship. They have to be working on their own spiritual development along with the abilities that they may have. And there are too many out there that are not doing that.
No.
And mediumship reflects it. I mean, they still may have a gift, but it's not what it could be if they were constantly working on kindness, love, you know, assisting other people, these matters. So,
well, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. I mean, you could have someone who physical phenomena is attending them, but they're a rogue. Personally, they're not developed at all themselves.
yeah.
So therefore, like attracts like. See, and they, you know, I think a lot of people want to get out there. They want to be known. They want to make some money, and I understand that. Okay, fine, but you've attracted into your space people that are like you. And if you're not, like you just said, if you're not developed personally yourself, then just because a spirit's manifesting, that could be trouble, you know. Because once they're in your space, I don't know, man, it is difficult to get rid of them. But I agree, develop yourself personally, and surround yourself with a circle of people that are just as loyal to the cause. As almost like it's a sacred thing of life. And then you'll have incredible manifestations if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's happened. I just think the breakdown of the home circle is just where it starts, you know. And social media and these societal trends have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I don't think culturally we are set up to develop physical mediums anymore, in that they're not recognized at young ages like perhaps they were, during the heyday of spiritualism. A lot of times, and I've had this discussion a couple of times recently, if somebody's having some manifestation, poltergeist type activities in their house, they don't necessarily know that's because they've got a physical developing medium, young person probably, that's also there. And so they end up, being afraid. They end up being institutionalized. We don't treat them with the support that they need to even begin to develop. I think the information's just not out there.
In the early days of spiritualism, a lot of young mediums were consigned to the insane asylum because their parents were religious fanatics. But just as many young mediums were surrounded with love by their parents, and they developed, and they became incredible mediums. But one of my wife's favorite statements is, we haven't developed as a species. If you look out in the world, it's like we're not developing as a species the way we should be.
Yeah.
And I think that adds to it a lot, that we're not seeing these mediums out there. But you know what? The fact that we don't see them doesn't mean they don't exist, because you could have a medium who is a good person, who is highly developed, and who is surrounded by a loving, dedicated circle that want nothing to do with, going outside that front door. Once you're out that door, then all hell can break loose. People want a part of you. They want to, I wouldn't blame anybody for not wanting to go outside the privacy of their own circle.
Do you have any suggestions for people who want to develop then? If you gave a step-by-step, here's what you're going to do if you think you've got the potential for physical mediumship, how would you tell them to move forward?
I would first say, prove that. Prove that you have physical mediumship ability. But just tell me, first of all, like I said before, give me anybody for 5 minutes, and I'll tell you in 5 minutes. I'll tell them in 5 minutes if things are going well or they need this or that. I could easily test anyone. When a physical phenomenon is happening, the sacredness of that in itself is so important to have people around you. The first thing would be search out anyone who's sympathetic towards the cause and get them with you. Or search out anyone who can help you understand what it is. And do not go further until you have done that. Seek out help. Do not get yourself involved with people that just want to have a good time and the table just moved. Whoa. You don't know who's moving that table. You really don't know who it is. So it's a really touchy thing. It is. You need, if the person has the wherewithal to search out help, I would say search out anyone you know who is sympathetic towards what's going on. And then maybe they can help you find someone else, or maybe they could, lead them to someone like myself who could sit down and talk to them and say, you're not going insane. It's a wondrous gift if you develop it correctly. It's a gift. It's not a curse. It's a gift given to you by nature.
Well, Riley, I really have enjoyed this conversation, and I would recommend anyone that wants to look into the work you've done, The French Revelation, my favorite all-time book on the subject of independent voice. Also, the other one you mentioned, which was
The Hereafter?
The Hereafter, yes. That is also one of my favorites. But all of your work is incredible. Keep doing it. You're bringing out material that probably wouldn't reach as many people because they wouldn't take the time to do that kind of research and
You
find
go to I have since found out, well, actually I've used it for years, is bookfinder.com. If you put my name in the search window of bookfinder.com, that'll show you all the books. And even even though Amazon, yes, they have more than enough money, yes, but Amazon still is an interesting vehicle. If you just put my name in the search window, all my books will come up on Amazon. ABE Books is another great one. Lulu Books, but you have to want to.
Yep.
And you have to want to do the search. And here we are, we find ourselves talking to one another because we've all gravitated towards the same truth.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it works. So, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing with your show. And you with your book, your Psychic Book Club, Gary and Sally, you guys are, it's always an honor and a joy to talk to you, man.
Well, if you were to leave the audience with a last word, what would it be?
I would say look into these spiritual items we're talking about and just see how it complements your common sense and it validates your existence, because these spiritual truths can liberate your mind and you will realize that you are a gem of the universe and you will live forever.
Well said, my friend. Well said.
Perfect.
Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
You've been a delight.
And until we meet again.
You bet.
Till then.
All right, kids.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.